What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Grid Live Encore. I'm Ben Schneider, joined as always by Brandon Crossland. Brandon, how's it going? Great to see you got the regular setup again on your new PC.
Yeah, we're back at home base now, Ben. Good to be back on Grid Live Encore. And yes, the thing is built, so we're all good back where we belong.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. So just so that everybody at home watching is aware, obviously a big weekend for us here at the Grid Network. We had our friend Jackson Lambros out at the Thermal Club providing coverage for us. Our leader, Joe Samaniego, had a time crunch yesterday. He had to leave the wrap-up show a little bit early. And through all of that, just trying to get ready for the show tonight. We don't have usual graphics for you all in terms of race results and everything. We're still going to go through all the series that we regularly cover. Josh Birch, unfortunately, unable to join us tonight as well. We'll give you the quick rundown on F3 and F2 and then get into the NASCAR weekend at COTA. But first, as always, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters who make things like Jackson going to the Thermal Club this weekend possible. Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for your support. And again, if you like what you see tonight as well, you can consider joining them in our Patreon, or if you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, we also have options through Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chats as well. And of course, if you can't contribute to us financially, you can always support us through all of our social media platforms, especially right here on YouTube. You see the banner across the bottom of our screen right now. We are so close to that 1,000 subscriber threshold, so make sure you hit the subscribe button if you have not already and support our content and our coverage in that manner. Now, real quick, before we get into the weekend at COTA, we do want to tell you guys who won the F3 and F2 races. If you haven't seen already, Martinez Stenshorn picked up his maiden win in the sprint race. Dino Bogdanovich took the feature. Luke Browning and Leonardo Fornaroli are tied for the championship lead over in F3. Now in F2, an interesting situation. Isaac Hadjar almost pulled off the double, winning both the sprint and the feature, but he was given a time penalty in his sprint win, fell back, I believe, to P6. Roman Stanek was deemed Roman Stanek inherited the win after Hadjar was deemed at fault for an opening lap incident between the two. Zane Maloney still holds the points lead on the heels of his double to start the year over in Bahrain. So we'll keep an eye on that and follow those championships throughout the year as we continue on here throughout 2024. That's the weekend in Melbourne, and we'll have more on that a little bit later as we close the show. I certainly have some thoughts on the whole Logan Sargent situation, so make sure you stay tuned for those. I was moderating the F1 segment yesterday on the wrap-up show. Didn't get a chance to necessarily go into that as deeply as I would like to, so we'll take some time to do that at the end of the show tonight. In the meantime, though, let's get started with the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at Circuit of the Americas. Corey Heim was the race winner. No major surprise there. So Brandon, we'll start with him. Obviously, he's won a lot of races the last couple of years. Perhaps should have won a championship last year. Of course, things all went wrong for him with his deal with Carson Hocevar in the season finale at Phoenix. But when it comes to Corey Heim, in your estimation, is he the best series regular in trucks right now?
I'd certainly say so. Along with a couple of others, you got to look at Ty Majeski and company, but especially here on the road course, the one road course race they've had that they have for the whole calendar at Circuit of the Americas. Corey Heim was the man to beat, and he showed it on Saturday. And what I found very interesting, Ben, was Tricon Garage. They're so intentional. I think I heard this right on the broadcast. They're so intentional on getting that road course race right, wherever it may be. It's Circuit of the Americas for the time being, but who knows? We could go back to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, or even to somewhere else in the future as well. But they were building a specific truck, from what I understand, for this race, and I would be hard pressed to find any other team in the entire field that's going to put that much money and effort behind winning this one race. So I think that put them at a really high advantage, especially against other guys like IMSA regular Connor Zilisch, which, we'll talk about him later, but this was his first time. We'll talk about him later because it's, all the first for him and how great of a job he did, but still a lot of raw talent to bring to a Formula One based, purpose-built track with all the track limits and whatnot, and the wide range turns and the hairpins. But with these heavy machines, it's a whole different game. Corey Heim was the best of the bunch, and especially with Toyota, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, it is an interesting dynamic this year. It is the only road course on the schedule. And again, that's a whole other conversation that I think we could get into. If we're only going to do one road course race, I think a lot of teams would prefer we at least do two or three or don't do any at all, because like you mentioned, the teams that take this race seriously, they do go out there, they build a road course specific truck, and they only get to use it one time a year. So you certainly have to maximize this opportunity. That's exactly what Corey Heim has done here, and Tricon Garage as well. And like you mentioned, Brandon, finishes to start the year second at Daytona, third at Atlanta, third at Vegas, sixth at Bristol, and obviously the win at COTA this weekend. I think, again, when you look at the body of work that he's put together, not just this year, not even just last year, when he was running part-time with KBM in 2022, he picked up a couple of wins very early on in his career there. So I think, if you look at what he showed us in the ARCA series, and then what he's continued to show us with the opportunities that he's gotten in trucks, I think he's certainly going to be a force to be reckoned with on Sundays in the not too distant future. But as for right now, again, you have to look at him as a championship favorite in the truck series for the time being.
Yeah, average finish of third so far this season.
There you go.
You can't go wrong with that. He's definitely the class of the field. Definitely going to make my championship four every time. I don't know if I've been consistent on that or not. We'll have to go back and listen. I hope I put him there. Surely I put him there in the championship four. He's got to be.
Yeah, well, average finish of third, and only one finish through the first five races worse than third, and it's a sixth place, so still not too bad there. You mentioned him briefly there, Brandon, but Connor Zilisch, he certainly had an eventful day. Was up front and then towards the back, and then worked his way back up front, and then got shuffled back once again. I mean, it was a very eventful debut for him. We talked on the show last week about the possibility, could he, with how much hype he has surrounding him, and I think deservedly so, kind of go out and pull out an SVG upset. And it looked like after qualifying, setting a track record and winning the pole by no small margin whatsoever, but he might be on his way to that. He did ultimately come up just short of that. But how impressed were you rather by Zilich's debut, and not just in the trucks, but then doing kind of his own version of a double, because he went out to Pensacola at Five Flags to run the ARCA East race the very same evening.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that he was able to do that. And of course, you and I not really surprised much. We were kind of already anticipating this the week previous before we got to Austin. We knew Connor Zilich's resume: a Rolex 24 winner, Sebring winner in LMP2 with that team there. The name of the team eludes me, but had it last week. But yeah, he coming over to a truck. Again, it's really heavy, and also just assimilating into the NASCAR thinking of things. He has to make a pit stop, like the pit stop in a truck series style way. Like what is that? For LMP2 car, you come in, they pop you up, they get it done, you pop out. In a matter of seconds. There's a lot more he's had to go through here, and the ability to just get in there and do it quickly, and that puts him far ahead. That's why he's one of the top prospects. I think it puts him so much higher ahead of a bunch of these other guys that might need some time to get things put together.
Yeah, we're talking about Aero Motorsport, right? His
yes, right.
Yeah,
right.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, again, obviously, looked very strong in qualifying, and had a shot at pulling off a win on debut. Unfortunately, things just didn't go his way. But I think, given everything that happened to him in this race, he's going to be very happy with all the experience he gained racing throughout the pack and trying to come through the pack, and ultimately recovering to a fourth place finish, which is also, ironically enough, where he finished at Five Flags later that evening in the ARCA East race. Gio Ruggiero took the win there over Williams Sawalich. Bubba Pollard, a name that we'll be keeping an eye on this upcoming weekend. He got some prep for his Xfinity start at Richmond that's coming up, finishing in third place. And but again, Zilisch, I think, could have even finished higher than he did. The 18 and the 20 were just far and away the class of the field. Only two cars on the lead lap to end that ARCA East race. Bubba Pollard in third, and then, despite electrical gremlins in the first half of the race, Connor Zilisch coming home with a P4 finish, just as he did in trucks earlier that same day as well. But Brandon, I know you've been very high on Bubba Pollard's Xfinity opportunity he's about to get here with Junior Motorsports. Do you have any predictions before we move on to cover the Xfinity race this weekend as to how he might do?
It's really tough to predict an Xfinity race, so I don't want to go too far as to say, top five easily. But I mean, it's with the same equipment that Dale Jr. had to go out there and do that. And how much more? I didn't expect that kind of result with Dale Earnhardt Jr. coming back to Richmond. So how much more should I expect a good finish with Junior Motorsports equipment with the short track regular, the guy from Sonoya who's been this is his bread and butter. He hasn't been in the Cup ranks, but this is what he does. Of course, he hasn't been in this car with the other ones, but it's similar enough to where I think he's gonna really shock some people on FS1 on Saturday and do an impressive job. Where is he going to finish? I don't really know. I don't think you're going to be able to figure that one out. But certainly, got to be top 20, got to be top 15. That's about as far as I can go. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think if he can keep himself clean, he knows how to find a rhythm at places like Richmond, and he's gonna know some things about short track racecraft that some of these other guys that maybe if short tracks aren't there where they like to go, they don't favor it as much as the other places, they're going to have some trouble with Bubba Pollard.
So in 2014, Josh Berry got a similar opportunity. He ran an Iowa race in what was the nationwide series at the time and finished in 12th for Junior Motorsports, and then got one more start at Homestead later that year. But very next year, he got another chance to run the same track, Richmond, with Junior Motorsports in 2015, and he finished 7th there. So third Xfinity start compared to his first, but a very similar situation. Somebody coming from the late model scene and hopping right in an Xfinity car, and again, not going out and competing for the win, but still running very competitively and very strong for a driver's debut. Because again, it's going to be his debut in one sense, but certainly, Bubba Pollard has, loads of experience, much more experience than a lot of the drivers that he's going to be competing against in that field. So I certainly wouldn't put a top 10, maybe even a top 5 past him. I'd be mildly surprised if he went out and won the race, but I think that's, asking any driver to win on debut. Although Ty Gibbs pulled it off the Daytona road course a couple of years ago, you just never know how things are going to work in these races these days. But I would not put a good result past him in the slightest. He's certainly, done his homework and has preparations for what he's going to be facing here this weekend.
Yeah, to segue to our next topic, I think for Pollard to get a win at Richmond, he'll have to make his way through NASCAR overtime, or maybe double overtime.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, this is going to be the main talking point of the stream tonight, because I certainly some mixed emotions with how this race played out. The Xfinity Series race, Colleague Racing looked home free with Shane van Gisbergen and AJ Allmendinger running 1-2, and then it all went wrong at the end with multiple overtime finishes, and Austin Hill put a move on SVG. SVG then had the door open for him to return the favor. Kyle Larson snuck through, got past both of them, and then SVG got dropped way down the running order anyway because he was deemed to have cut the course in the S's. So I guess, Brandon, we'll start with the first part of this segment here. What did you think of Austin Hill's move to try to win the race? Did you think it was fair game?
I think it's just being bunched up in the pack and all those cars going up the elevation to that first turn there at COTA. There's nothing like it. And I think I'll just jump off here for a minute. One of the worst takes I've ever had in public about auto racing was about Circuit of the Americas. I was watching a live stream test for IndyCar in 2020, and for some reason I said, and I'm not ashamed to say it now because I think it's dumb. I said, "Wow, COTA is so flat." What? Like, it's got the highest elevation in turn 1. Like, I've never been there. I should have just shut my mouth. But people got on me real fast for that. Anyway, back to this. Austin Hill going up all that elevation, shunted into SVG, and yeah, that was. I don't. It looked like just what anyone else would be running into, just running up into traffic up there. But yeah, SVG had the thing taken care of. If it wasn't for that, it did cause a lot of ruckus, and it was neat to see him at least be able to still battle for second and take second after all that. But he's starting to see some of the villains of the sport, and I think he's also finally getting out of that shell of like, okay, I'm just happy to be here. Yeah. But now that he's getting a little ruffled, like, oh, Oh, that's how we're gonna play. Oh, okay. All right. Game on. Let's go.
Yeah, well, and again, he took second on the road, but that 30-second time penalty that he got on the last lap just dropped him down to 27th place in the final results. And AJ Allmendinger as well, getting shuffled back and somehow salvaging a top 10 out of all of that. But again, I think, and again, viewers of this channel, my channel, we know how I feel about overtime. If we have to compromise, again, I'm going to, die on this hill here. You get one attempt. I don't like this whole multiple attempts thing. And I think, it certainly took the race out of the hands of, to be frank, the two guys that most deserve to win it. I'm not saying Kyle Larson didn't deserve to win it. He did everything that he had to do with rules that apply to everybody, and qualified on pole and ultimately came through to win the race. Although this was an interesting stat that came up as well. I believe Kyle Larson, maybe the first driver ever, certainly the first in a very long time, to qualify on pole, win the race, and only lead the final lap of the race. So how do you like that for an interesting nugget there with Kyle Larson?
That's a new stat. And
yeah,
I didn't have Kyle Larson on my bingo card for coming out on the second overtime.
Yeah, I mean, again, very, very chaotic finish to the race, kind of the opposite of what we saw in the Cup Series, where the only two cautions were for the stage breaks. And again, not a huge fan of seeing those return. Brandon, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the return of those this weekend. Did the racing feel interrupted to you?
It kind of reared its ugly head, but I think it didn't really bother the flow of this particular race yesterday. Now there are some points when it's a little more annoying. I think this is one of those instances where it was a little less obvious that, hey, we're stopping the race. It felt a little more like, it's kind of unimportant, irrelevant.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Larson a little bit before we move on to the big discussion that I think everybody's talking about, especially in light of what happened to Shane van Gisbergen. This is the first time that 17 car that Hendrick Motorsports has been bringing out with their Cup drivers and with a couple of other one-offs and specialists as well. Boris said got an opportunity to attempt the Roval race last year. Unfortunately, didn't qualify, but he's going to come back for Sonoma again this year. Roger Caruth got a chance to run that car at Phoenix at the end of 23. But for the most part, this car has been used by Hendrick's Cup drivers to, as a bushwhacking car, for lack of better terms, Cup drivers racing in the Xfinity Series. But this is the third year that car has come out and made a handful of starts. This is the first time that it's actually gone to victory lane. And as much as I am not a fan of Cup drivers in the lower divisions, I know that, it means a lot for Rick Hendrick and for that paint scheme, that 17 car, to be in victory lane for a whole number of reasons. But also it's a little surprising to me that it hadn't happened yet, with names like William Byron and Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson running that car. Brandon, are you surprised that it took them this long to actually get that car to victory lane in the Xfinity Series?
Yeah, it took me just until seeing this question today to realize they haven't won yet. Because every time that the Hendrick 17 is in an Xfinity race, it's been at a lot of road courses, it seems, just based on memory alone, but for what that's worth. But they're always front runners. They're always up there in the top 5, battling it out, leading a lot of laps, but just, I guess, never able to get it done. Even with Boris Said, which I'm super excited about his return. I'm sure you are too, to come back to Sonoma, and hopefully you'll be able to get us some inside stuff there with Brock out there in wine country. But yeah, they didn't think that they hadn't won yet. They've come awfully close, that's for sure.
Yeah, plenty of poles, plenty of top 5s, races where they've led the most laps, but the first time they actually broke through and got a win with that car. So, kudos to them. I mean, again, not a fan of the principle of that car being out there with those drivers, but it is going to give Boris Said a chance to come back this year, and that's going to be great to see, and certainly looking forward to that at Sonoma. And, again, I know that, you can be against the principle of it, generally speaking, but, there are still hardworking men and women on those teams that put those cars together and bring them to the racetrack, and everybody comes out with the same goal to win. They got the job done, took advantage of the opportunity, more power to them. So congratulations to Kyle Larson and Hendrick Motorsports. Let's move on now. Let's talk about the main talking point from this weekend, what happened to Shane van Gisbergen and the track limit situation. Before we get into it, Adam says what SVG did to Austin Hill, loved it, showed he wasn't afraid to fight for the win. Now, on the final lap, SVG cut the S's just by a little bit, by, I think, no more than 6 inches to a foot. Certainly didn't gain 30 seconds worth of track time by doing so, but that was the penalty that he got post-race. Despite crossing the line in second place, he ends up with a 27th place result as a result of that. This sparks what has continued to be a major conversation all throughout the weekend in terms of how track limits are imposed at Circuit of the Americas when it comes to NASCAR, because you are not allowed to cut track limits through the S's. If you do, you're given a drive-through penalty, or if it's on the last lap, because it's the last lap, you get 30 seconds added to your race time. But everywhere else on the course, including more left and right sweeping turns coming out of the S's, that section of the course, anything goes. And there are no track limits violations there. Of course, Formula One is a very different story. The series of this track was built for. But when it comes to NASCAR, we, for some reason, only keep track of track limits through part of the course, but other parts are fair game. So, Brandon, the first question I have for you just right off the bat is, does that seem like an inconsistency to you? Obviously, I get why you don't want drivers just going straight through the S's, but if you're going to impose it during the S's, doesn't it make sense that you ought to impose it all the way around the entire racetrack?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at this from NASCAR's standpoint. What they, again, I like to say this a lot. They're not dumb. They make these decisions for a reason with a multitude of people, surely. And so I look at the way they have set that up, and I see it as, we're going to heavily scrutinize the parts of the track where you were going to get a definite time advantage. So going through the S's, if you cut that in any way, you are going to you have the chance of it wrongfully advancing your position or gaining a good chunk of time. And the places where they don't care are the places where, if anything, you're just going to lose some time by going out of track limits and going out a little bit more. But the reason they go out so far, the first thing I think of is Watkins Glen turn one. The reason they go out that far is not because they're getting a time advantage per se. It's just so that they're driving heavy bricks, and they're so heavy that it's just more comfortable for them to veer out, to try to stop it probably does affect I'm sure it does affect your time as well, because, stopping to meet that curb and not go out into the extra runoff is inevitably going to slow you down. So just the whole field agreeing, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're all going to flow out here out into this off-track limit area. And that's just the accepted way to race. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be fast. And I think that's the reason. I think that's where NASCAR is coming from, is they're deciding that if you're going to lose time doing that, you're fine. If you're going to, just directly go through a spot where you're going to gain time or advance your position, then that's clearly out of bounds. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm crossing
Sure
what I'm saying, but
yeah. Well, and again, I think, to your point, that part of the track of Watkins Glen used to be a gravel trap with, grass and then obviously sand after that. And so obviously that is a natural track limit. You're not going to use that to try to, avoid scrubbing off speed, because once you hit that, you're not only are you going to scrub off a little bit of speed, you're out of control and you're going to wreck your car. So it's a natural track limit. Don't go there. Obviously, you've got grass and sand in the way, and then they paved over it, and then it became just part of the racetrack. And again, my philosophy has been very clear. It's kind of like, I think Parker Kligerman puts it best. If you don't want drivers using it, make it so that it's unusable. Put something other than pavement or even runoff area to keep them from using that part of a track, because if it's available to them and if it can find a way to avoid scrubbing off speed, like you're mentioning, Brandon, it's a longer way around, it's greater distance, but because you're not slowing your car down as much, you can maintain higher speed, and it helps with your track times.
Yeah, and Parker's been one of the drivers that's been very vocal about his stance on track limits and keeping that discussion going. So I'm sure he probably has a lot to say yet again about this weekend. That'd be interesting to find out.
And an interesting situation involving him, because he ended up cutting the course. AJ Allmendinger was also penalized for a track limits violation on the same lap. He had kind of gotten out of control, couldn't recover back on in time, but it was deemed that Parker was forced off the track and into cutting the course. AJ was not. And because AJ was not forced, he was given a drive-through penalty. And like I said, was able to come back up to the field and at least salvage a decent result out of it, but not nearly as strong of a finish as he looked like he was going to get based on how he was running before that final restart. So stinks for him and for Colleague Racing, but obviously not nearly as much of a gut punch as it was for Shane van Gisbergen to finish second on track and then, again, only cut the S's by really just that much. Brandon, I don't know how you feel about this. I personally feel like if he had been given a 3-second or 5-second penalty, similar to what they do in Formula One, I could at least maybe understand that. I could think the whole nuance of, keeping track of track limits in one part of the course, but not the other is a little bit silly, but I can at least say, you know what, fair enough. That's consistent with, about what other penalties are in other racing series for track limits.
Yeah, for sure.
The 30 seconds to me is absolute insanity to bump him that far down the running order for something that clearly doesn't even get you close to that much of an advantage.
The punishment didn't really fit the crime there. It should have been a lot less. And actually, I just did hear Justin Marks talking on XM about this very topic, and he was sharing with Moody about in MotoGP that they have for the U.S. MotoGP, they go to Circuit of the Americas, and they have what they have at every other track. They got that extra runoff area where if you do cut the course, you have to go through that kind of like a rallycross kind of joker lap, where you have to take the longer, the opposite of a joker lap. I forget which is which. You have to take a longer designated part of the course that lap that will, you can take that I think you can take it as fast as you want, but that will count as your time penalty because it will make you have to go further. But and instead of bumping you back to 26th, it's only going to put you back just a few positions, which is much more appropriate for the kind of things that they're violating. The 6 inches, 12 inches. And I was thinking also today, like track limits, what track limits used to be was death. Courses were made in such a way where you didn't violate track limits because you were going to die. Like that was the end of it. You're going to slam a wall. Circuit of the Americas is about as furthest away from the road courses of yesteryear. It is, we all know that it's 21st century, plenty of room, airport runway, Silverstone style. You're going to be fine. And so I think that kind of puts NASCAR into a box where they can't really think about this road course as they do as Watkins Glen or Sonoma, because it's not really like Watkins Glen or Sonoma at all. It's got a lot of places that drivers can take advantage of that you can't do at these other two places that we've been so used to all these years.
Well, on that note, Brandon, I don't know if you have any feelings about this. I personally don't know that, again, not that I think the racing was terrible this weekend, but I think the officiating could have been a lot better. And I think that, to your point about SVG, the punishment certainly doesn't fit the crime. We have plenty of great road courses here in the United States. We've got a lot of ovals that have infield road courses. I don't think Indianapolis is going to be an option anytime soon based on how that experiment went. But we do have plenty of tracks to choose from here. I don't know that the schedule needs to be more than the 5 or 6 road courses that we have right now. Is there maybe an argument that we should look at a Mid-Ohio or a Road America or a Road Atlanta before we look at COTA for NASCAR? Does NASCAR need to be at a track that was really purpose-built, not for stock cars, but for F1 cars?
Yeah, I think it's more of the deal with Eddie Gossage. I think that was done there with Texas Motor Speedway in conjunction, and also just the need for NASCAR saying, hey, we've got to be in this Texas market some more. We've got to go to Austin. What can we do to be in Austin? I think that went a lot more into their decision-making to be there than the track itself. I think the track was just, and this is our option. This is what we have available. I think, I don't know this, but just I think top of mind was that's the market we want to be in, not that's the track we want to be at. I think they made it to their liking. And it's had its problems, and I would much rather us be at traditional road courses. And America has a lot of great traditional road courses. We left one, Road America, but things go into that, and the schedule shuffling. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and again, I think there is an aspect of it where it's like, well, it's cool that Kimi Räikkönen got that win with Ferrari in 2018, and then 5 years later he comes to COTA and he runs the Project 91 car in a completely different series, but at the same track. And there's always it was nice to see Kamui Kobayashi this weekend, and the occasional ringers that still come out. But again, I don't know that we wouldn't get that at other road courses, that we don't get that at other road courses either. And again, if the racing if it's going to be, in my opinion, this poorly officiated, certainly in the Xfinity Series, even the Cup Series, I think to an extent, although it certainly wasn't nearly as bad. And I have to actually give NASCAR credit for not being trigger happy on the caution button for all the spins and single car incidents that we saw. Kudos to them for letting the race actually play out. I wish that they let it play out for all 68 laps rather than just the final 38, but I digress. We have a discussion a little bit yesterday. Yeah, we don't need to bring that up here once again for the time being. But again, I just the Saturday racing, particularly what we saw to finish Xfinity, it kind of left me with a sour taste in my mouth, and it left me wondering, if we're going to have this many controversies, I think first of all we need a complete overhaul in terms of how we officiate track limits and make it very clear and very consistent as to what the penalties are going to be. I think, again, 30 seconds, far too harsh for, again, if you can even call it a crime, because I don't know how much time SVG really gained by doing that. Maybe a couple of tenths, but, certainly not even the 3 or 5 that I think would have been more in line with what other series do. And certainly not 30 to drop him 25 spots. I mean, come on now. That's people, and I think people might forget this in the moment. SVG is running for a championship in Xfinity. So, you have to think he's going to be a threat to, he almost won this weekend. I'm sure he's going to get a road course win at some point this year. But, they don't, as I said this weekend, when it comes to Formula One, everybody thought it was going to be another Max Verstappen win. Races aren't run on paper. They're run on the racetrack, and you never know how these things are going to go. Can you imagine if it comes down to a point situation and just by a couple of points, SVG finds himself on the outside looking in? I
doesn't come to that.
Yeah. But let's certainly hope it doesn't end. Again, I don't think it will. I think he's going to go out and win one of these road course races, but there's that aspect of it as well. I don't think he deserved, this much of a drop in points based on, something that I don't even know if it was intentional. I think it's just everybody going for every ounce of racetrack that they can get, and him trying to get back to Austin Hill while also holding off a hard charging Kyle Larson. And that's what happened. And unfortunately it drops him that far down the leaderboard. I'm just not a fan of it.
Yeah, look, the officiating needs some work at the road courses. I agree with you there, but there's something about going into a place where it's always known for being so strict. You got a time penalty, time cut. You got to move. From that world to NASCAR coming into Austin and using the full track, using the track for its full capabilities in places where it's not an outright you're cheating, you're cutting the course, but using the track for all it's worth. I'm kind of on the fence about this. Like, there's sometimes when I think it looks tacky, but then there's sometimes like this weekend where I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. I like seeing that. So I don't know where you the viewer stand on that, but I think there's two different sides of that. But I think at least the casual or the one that might just be tuning in, if they know anything about the IndyCar world or Formula One, whenever they see NASCAR out on a road course and they see them just using every inch of pavement they can to gain an advantage, save direct violations of cutting the course, I think they think there's a novelty to that, and it's something that they really can't get anywhere else.
Just to put it in perspective, and then we'll move on here. There were 29 cars on the lead lap in the Xfinity race at COTA. SVG, as I mentioned, finishes 27th. It reminds me of what happened to Regan Smith at Talladega in 2008. He made the pass in Tony Stewart below the yellow line. And again, you can argue that he got forced below there as well, but that's a track limits issue.
Yep.
He made a perfectly good pass. He was just out of bounds when he did it. So I could understand saying, even though he was forced, I can understand saying the rule is the rule. You can't overtake below the double yellow line. I don't even know if it was a double yellow line at the time. I think after that, they made a double yellow line to really reinforce it. But regardless, the out of bounds rule of the super speedways.
And Justin Haley's summer of 2019 as well. Don't forget that right at the line.
Another good one as well. Yeah. Did those instances justify? I could understand you arguing that it justifies putting them back to second or third or wherever they were before they made the move. Did it justify dropping them to the last car lead lap?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all about the bad officiating. I'm just talking about the general style of it. I don't think we need to keep them in between the lines everywhere on the track.
Yeah, but that's to the point that I'm trying to compare it to what we saw this weekend. I mean, there were two cars on the lead lap that were not within that 30 seconds that SVG was given his time penalty for. And so, for all intents and purposes, got dropped to basically the last car on the lead lap for a very similar situation regarding track limits. It just, to me, it's far too harsh of a punishment for what happened on track. And I hope that there's going to be conversation. And Brandon, I have to say, I caught a little bit of that conversation with Justin Marks on my drive home as well. And I think Moody mentioned that, it's going to be a big part of his show tomorrow. And like the main theme and the main question, talking about track limits in this sport. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think it's something that needs to be revisited, assuming we go back to COTA. I understand that some fans got emails asking, if you want to renew your tickets for next year, which I suppose is a good sign if you're in the area and enjoy going to this race weekend. But, even if it's not COTA, other road courses and how can we find ways to make our officiating better? It's an important conversation that has to happen. I think it's going to happen this weekend, and hopefully we take a look at it and try to make some decisions as to how we can improve it going forward.
Yeah, if I was Justin Marks, I would be knocking at NASCAR's door like, hey, we've got enough road courses on the schedule now. I think we need to. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be in the rule book somewhere, but there's still got to be some sort of confusion with it somewhere. So it needs to be like we got this many road courses now on the calendar. We need to lay down the law. This is what we do here.
Let's move on now. Let's do one more open segment before we close out the show tonight. I want to give some thoughts on the whole situation regarding Williams and Logan Sargent being pulled from his car after Alex Albon crashed his. Williams didn't have a spare chassis. Knowing how the two drivers have performed over the last year plus as teammates, they pulled Logan Sargent. Williams pulled Logan Sargent from his car, gave his chassis to Alex Albon for the remainder of the weekend, with the idea that Albon gave them the best chance of finishing in the points and picking up a valuable marker or two in the constructors. Ultimately, Albon came up just short of that, gave it a valiant effort, ended up in P11. He was aided by the opportunity, a few cars ahead of Williams in the pecking order, both Mercedes, namely, and Max Verstappen having a combination of engine issues and a last lap crash in the case of George Russell. Still not quite enough, though, to get Albon into the points. So, Brandon, on that note, does Alex Albon's failure to score points prove that maybe this wasn't the best of looks and the greatest of decisions for Williams to bench Logan Sargent, who didn't make a mistake this weekend when Albon was the one who did?
It certainly doesn't come at a good time, does it? All through this year, it's just been Formula One and American Formula One fans. Andretti, no, we don't think they're going to be a competitive team. We don't think they would provide value to the sport. Your one of your core teams here, when it comes down to it, for mistakes that Logan did not make, he is put aside, and the person you put in there can't even make points. I really enjoyed the video you made on this. I don't know if you made it today or yesterday, but it was very well said on this topic. It's not a good look.
Yeah, I think it was actually, I think it was Friday night. I got the news and just had to get my thoughts out on paper. I thought about trying to turn it into an op-ed for Brock and NASCAR, but then I decided, let's just, throw it straight on my YouTube channel and, just get my thoughts out there as quickly as I can. But, I haven't changed my mind at all. I still strongly disagree with the decision. I do want to address, though, our friend Ed Hunter, who helps us out a lot with Formula E coverage. He commented on the video and did raise a point that I made that he very strongly disagreed with, and that's that when the margins are going to be this tight at the back of the field, even finishing 10th or 9th and only picking up 1 or 2 points, it could very well make a difference. And, I have to acknowledge, Ed, if you're watching this, that is certainly a valid point. And I understand that side of the argument. It's not that I disagree with it from a business decision. Nobody is sitting here, certainly not me, as much as I want to support the only American driver in the sport, the first full-time American in a decade and a half plus. It's very, very difficult to argue Logan Sargent gives Williams a better chance of points than Alex Albon. I think the opposite is, as close to objectively true as you can possibly get. You can make the argument that the Williams obviously is not a very strong car or chassis that allows him to be competing for very many points, but the proof is how many points Albon picked up last year, how much he was outperforming his equipment, and he ended up with 27 points while Sargent only ended up with 1, and it comes with the caveat that he finished 12th on track. 2 cars ahead of him got disqualified. That's how he got his P10 and his only point that he scored to date in his Formula One career. I just don't like the optics of it from an ethics standpoint, and I understand that, Formula One's never been about that. I mean, you can go back 20 plus years when Ferrari made the swap with Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello on the line to gift Michael a win that he certainly did not need for the championship. I mean, team orders have always been a part of the game here. And, politics are just part of the sport as well. That doesn't mean I have to like it. That doesn't mean I have to be a fan of it or agree with it. And I just think the optics of pulling the driver out of the car that he did not crash, the driver that did not make a mistake, and taking him out of the weekend and compromising his confidence and his morale and his performance potentially going through the rest of the year, to do that to Logan Sargent when Alex Albon got in the car and ultimately didn't even bring home points, I just think it's not a very good look. And I think a lot of fans, made that opinion very clear. And I have to go back to that one fan on Twitter who said, look, guys, I flew out here from the United States. I'm a big Logan Sargent fan. I came to this race and I get off the plane and open my phone and see the news that my favorite F1 driver is not going to be racing this weekend. And I'm sure she was far from the only one. I mean, it's just, from an optics standpoint, I really don't like the move. I think not that the precedent wasn't there, not that, we haven't seen similar questionable decisions from a business standpoint be made in the sport before. But my biggest feeling was, Albon better bring home the points now. Because if he doesn't, it's going to be an even worse look. And that's ultimately what it ended up being. And just one final point before, I don't know, Brandon, if you have any more thoughts to add here, but I don't want this to, I don't want to be seen as, coming down hard on Alex Albon here either, because I think Albon got a lot of criticism for, putting out the statement that he put out and saying, look, Logan has been a total pro and handled this with, total class and total professionalism. And he got some comments in response to saying, well, why did you accept the offer then? Why did you not tell Williams no? And it's like, well, he's an employee of the team as well. I don't know that that was necessarily his choice. The team made a decision that he was going to race this weekend. He has to obey the team just as much as Logan does. And I mean, credit to him. He went out there, gave it his best shot, but came up short. And because he came up short again, I just think that it doesn't look good for Williams that they made the swap and really didn't come out better for it.
Yeah, people are pointing fingers at Alex Albon. They got their gaze in the wrong direction. This is strictly at Williams, and I can remember the leadership change there. It's probably more years ago than I think it is, but I remember when they had that big team principal change. Goodness, was it like 2020 or 2021? Probably.
Well, that was when Claire Williams stepped aside, but James Valve is there now. I think he started at the beginning of 23. So there's been some turnover in leadership for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, still, like, clearly the weakest link of, not to use a game show reference, the weakest link of the Formula One grid with these two. You said it when you talked about his confidence level. I can't imagine what that would do just to even your team, when it's something happens that's not your fault, even they don't believe in you to pull out a point. Which, I mean, to your, as you said, his track record has shown that he's, not he's a little bit accident prone in these in the limited starts he's had. Not always, but I mean that it's also Williams though. So what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, again, I know your main performance comparison is going to be against your teammate, but he's not driving a Mercedes. He's not driving a Ferrari or a Red Bull or even a McLaren or Aston Martin. He's in a Williams, and to be frank, Williams have not put together a very strong car in several years now. And again, I think it speaks very highly of Alex Albon that he picked up as many points as he did last year. And certainly for Logan, I think 1 point wasn't good enough in hindsight. He should have been able to capitalize on a couple of more opportunities. He should have avoided a couple more crashes than he ended up seeing there. But he was also a rookie. I think this is another conversation we go back to all the time as well. We don't give rookies very much time to improve on these mistakes before we say, okay, well, he clearly didn't work out. Let's move on to the next rookie in line and let's see what he can do. And I think that I often wonder how much talent or potential are we losing by that? Just because somebody doesn't go pull Lewis Hamilton and set the world on fire and almost win a championship his rookie year, that's what makes the Hamiltons and the, Ty Gibbses, in NASCAR of the world. That's what makes them so special and so incredible in their talents and what they can do on track. Is because rookies aren't supposed to do that. To be frank, rookies are supposed to make mistakes. Rookies are supposed to, go through the motions and try to learn, how their car handles and, how to improve on their skill set throughout the year. And then ideally they come back the next year and they show you what they learned and they take that step forward and it continues to go up from there. So
actually they get their sophomore slump and then the third year they show you what they can do.
Well, but again, is 2 years even enough in the grand scheme of things? And I think that's a question that needs to be asked as well.
I don't think Formula One gives you enough time to show what you can actually do because the seats are so limited, the talent is so high, and the money is so expensive.
Well, again, what would help the seats not be as limited as they are, right? Adding another team or two?
Add a team. Here we go.
But they don't seem interested in that. So
I will say for Williams, they have one of the best sponsor activations in the field on the top exhaust, the Duracell. 10 out of 10.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse too much here, but it leaves a sour taste in my mouth what happened this weekend. And at a time where the sport has, and I don't want to make this, because people got on my case on Twitter and saying, I was making it too nationalistic. And, I think there's something to be said for that aspect of it. I don't think that that's the entire issue because I want to be clear. I mean, if the roles were reversed and Logan Sargent had picked up, 20, 30 points last year and Alex Albon hadn't, and Sargent had crashed this weekend, I wouldn't be a fan of them putting him in the car for Alex. It doesn't help that, we're American F1 fans. We want to see somebody out there representing our country in a sport that, to be frank, hasn't had very much of that in recent years. And certainly on the heels of the Andretti deal, it doesn't make you feel very good either. But, it wasn't just an American issue for me. I'd have an issue, on principle with anybody getting pulled from their race seat because of a mistake that their teammate made that they didn't. And that was the issue to me, was that for all the talk that, Logan Sargent does nothing but crash and spin, and he's worse than Nikita Mazepin, and he's the worst driver on the grid, and he finished 21st in a 20-car championship last year in the points. He didn't make the mistake this weekend. His teammate did. And his teammate ends up taking his car. Again, I'm not saying I don't understand it from the business perspective, but it is not a good look to me. And I can't wrap my head around it any other way. So if people disagree, that's their right. There was certainly a lot of that on social media this weekend. I appreciate those that kept it respectful and allowed the discussion to continue. I think we need more of that. I think we need more of that healthy dialogue, and it's a rarity these days. So thank you to those who engaged in the discussion and kept it respectful like that. I truly appreciate it. But I'm going to hold firm. I just do not like how this weekend played out. And again, unfortunately, because, Logan Sargent is an American and it comes on the heels of Andretti Global not being let into the sport, at least for the time being. I don't see how this is going to, it's certainly not going to help when it comes to trying to stop the bleeding from American fans, being bored with the Red Bull dominance and frustrated that, a team of theirs here in America that wants to come into the sport has been told no. But I will say, on that note, at least we got a different winner this weekend and we have some sort of parity and maybe a tease if, Checo Perez saying that Carlos Sainz would have won anyway. Even if Max Verstappen hadn't had that issue, maybe we're going to get a closer battle than we might think. I still think Red Bull's going to be pretty dominant and run away with it at the end of the day, but maybe Ferrari can win 3 races this year instead of just 1 like we did last year, and we can get some different drivers up on the top step of that podium after all.
I'm not holding my breath, but for someone, I just want to poke fun at you a little bit. For someone who said they weren't going to pay attention to Formula One this year, save some of our group chats, it seems like you've been pretty occupied with all the news going on.
I said I wasn't going to watch it. I said I never said I'm not going to follow it and be able to comment on it on our shows here.
So you haven't seen a lap? Not a lap?
Well, I didn't watch Australia. I promise you that.
Okay.
I was sound asleep at midnight. I mean, our group chat was going crazy. Like,
yeah.
I think Jackson even called me out by name and said, like, "Hey, Ben, it's going to happen. Somebody else is going to win." And
Ben was going.
Yeah. Well, I woke up at 5:50 in the morning to head to a track meet, and I was certainly tired from that. So
Sure.
I've been awake for pretty much 18 hours at that point anyway. I don't know, but regardless, I would have been able to stay up through Australia. But again, it used to be fun. I used to enjoy staying up until 3 a.m. to watch these races. There were sometimes, I'd go to bed at 8 p.m. and I'd wake up at midnight and then watch the race and then go back to bed at 2:30 and get up at 7:30 and still get 9 hours of sleep. I just divided into a 4-hour segment here and a 5-hour segment there so I could still watch the race. It's just it's very hard to stay invested when it's as predictable as it is and you're frustrated from the American vantage point with Andretti being told no, and now what happened to Logan this weekend. So, I mean, I don't begrudge those that continue to enjoy it or watch it. And again, in full disclosure, if I had known that tweet would have made the rounds as much as it did, I probably would have been a little less strong in my tone and worded it a little bit more carefully there. So my apologies for that, but I stand by the rest of it. It's especially on the heels of NASCAR having such a great start to the year. It's not very fun to be an F1 fan in the States right now. And, that's just my personal opinion.
To quote KB, if you don't like that kind of racing, don't even watch.
Well, that's
what's happening.
Do we want to open that can of worms? Because
no, we don't.
Connor Daly made some comments earlier today on the heels of the Thermal Club. I don't know. I'm going to have to catch, I know our friend Alex is taping a Gay Racing podcast right now. So he certainly was fired up about that, but we're coming up on an hour here. Thank you guys for sticking with us. No, it's been a little bit of a different format tonight with some technical difficulties here, but
podcast style.
Podcast style. We made the show work. Before we go into the closing here, our friend Kobe Lambeth, good to see you, Kobe. How do you think Logan Sargent will respond to this moving forward? Will it motivate or break him? This is another point that Ed brought up in his comment. And to Ed's credit, I think he had a point here. If Logan lets something like this completely destroy him and break him and mentally just wreck him, then, you can make the argument he never should have been an F1 to begin with. And I think, it probably sounds a little bit harsh, but I think there is some truth to that. If you're going to be a driver in this series at the pinnacle of motorsport, you can't let things like this totally define you. And I want to give Logan a lot of credit because, when I first got the news, there was a part of me that's like, if this had been me, I would have been on the next flight home. I'd be looking for an IndyCar ride tomorrow morning. I would be that fed up, but.
And he could get it if he wanted it.
Yeah. And Logan stayed at the track. He went through, I saw him on social media this weekend. They were doing the typical, team bits and games that they do to post to the Instagram reels and TikToks and everything. And he was a part of that. He was taking pictures with the fans, signing autographs. He was a total pro, handled it far better than I think I would have. This is going to be the true test for him now, because if he can use this as fuel to his fire to go out and, show that he has improved and pick up a couple of points here and there and gain those positions and gain those results, then I think maybe we'll look back on this as a blessing in disguise and what he needed to be whipped into shape and show those improvements. But on the other hand, I think it's, he's got to be very careful here. These next couple of races are going to be critical, because the other side of it is I think it's going to be very easy for him now to get it in his head that, the team doesn't believe in him and they sat him out for a mistake that his teammate made because they were that much more confident in his teammate despite that mistake. So it's going to be very critical over these next couple of rounds how he responds and bounces back, because he's going to have to bounce back. Otherwise, I think he's already kind of been on the hot seat, and there are some rumors coming out today that maybe AlphaTauri's given Daniel Ricciardo an ultimatum. We don't want to speak on that too much, but Liam Lawson, I think a lot of people saw him as a contender for that last Williams seat. They were battling, he and Logan were, when they were in Formula 2, and probably a situation where he should have been on the grid this year and things just didn't work out. But this is a business, as you always say, Kobe, it's, what have you done for me lately? And I think if Logan goes out and uses this as motivation and picks up some good results, he'll put those discussions to bed. If he can't do that, if he's consistently not even getting close to getting out of Q1, if he's consistently the last car running, then I think it's very hard for me to see him back with Williams in 2025. He's probably on his way to IndyCar or something else here in the States, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, one thing's for sure. If you're an American Formula One fan and you've got some heartbreak from the recent months, I think I speak for some when I say that this gives you a great storyline to, come on, Logan, what can you do? Do it for America.
Yeah, no doubt.
That is definitely nationalistic. I do not apologize about that. USA.
There you go. Nico Krinkelberg here says you could liken it to Carlos not getting re-signed, that little fire for him. Well, hey, there you go. Carlos Sainz is the only driver not named Max Verstappen to win since, Miami of last year? I think Miami was the first race after Checo got his last win, and it's been all Max ever since, except twice where Carlos won for Ferrari. So, I think Christian Horner said it. Toto Wolff has, maybe been a part of some of these conversations here. I would be shocked if after the performance that Carlos put in this weekend and has put in over the last several rounds, if he's not on the grid next year. I think he is certainly, he knows that he doesn't currently have a job for 2025, and he went out and won the race this weekend and, led his teammate home, who is going to be at Ferrari next year, and he's not. So I think he's really showed teams that he still has what it takes to compete at a very high level in this sport, and they should look at him for next year.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much here. We're coming up on an hour again. I know a little bit of a different show tonight with not having our graphics and everything, but we appreciate the support as always. We appreciate those who stop by the comments section, and we appreciate most of all our Patreon supporters, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us, and what has allowed us to continue to grow this outlet as far as we have, and allows Jackson to be at the Thermal Club this weekend, is going to allow me and Joe to be back out of Portland, Lord willing, in the next couple of months. So thank you so much for your support. You too, if you liked what you saw tonight, can join them on Patreon. As you can see, we have a goal of $500 per month to help us get to the track on a more regular basis, and that only expands our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. You can buy a coffee specifically for any honor or talent. So, for example, if you like Jackson's coverage this weekend, you can make a note out to him. Any amount helps us grow this motorsports media outlet here at Grid Network. We also have YouTube Super Chats enabled as well if you're watching on that platform. And if you can't contribute financially, of course, you can follow us on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads. Most importantly, right here on YouTube, you see it across the bottom of our screen. Help us get across the milestone of 1,000 subscribers. We would truly, truly appreciate it here. Now, on Wednesday, Kobe will be back with Grid Tonight, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Women in Motorsports back this week as well, and then we start it all over again. Grid Live next weekend. Lots to look forward to there. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off for this evening?
Yeah, Logan Sargent's going to be a fun story to cover. I think he's going to be my one shiny moment for this week after all that news.
I did it again. I was so enthusiastic about the support that we got. I forgot to roll into the one shining moment. So, Brandon,
okay, you go right ahead. There's mine.
Logan, that was mine yesterday as well. And I guess, on the heels of our discussion, I think I'll just stick with it again. As frustrating of a situation as it was, certainly I am glad that Logan was able to handle it with as much class as he did.
Right.
Understandably, a very difficult weekend, but I think everybody Williams pulled together and they tried their best. Unfortunately, came up short. And again, I think the leadership has to answer to that. But you can't say enough about how Logan and Alex as well. I think again, you scroll through the comments like we were talking about. Alex had to put up with some stuff, and not a lot of it was pleasant. So kudos to him for fighting through it and trying his best this weekend as well. And very difficult situation. Hopefully, they can get that team turned around and get some better results going forward.
And now NASCAR heads to the Commonwealth of Virginia for the next 2 weeks. And it's all short tracks. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And no, we're certainly looking forward to seeing what Bubba Pollard can do. And ARCA West, I believe, is back this weekend as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll have it all for you here next week on Grid Live Encore. In the meantime, for Brandon Crossland, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. Thank all of you who stopped by the chat. Peace out. We will see you next week. Have a good one.